The flashing red and blue lights painted the quiet suburban street like a war zone. Wild, pulsing colors bouncing off mailboxes, windows, and Malik's frightened face. "Hands on the wall! Don't move," shouted the officer, his voice cracking through the cold evening air. The command echoed off the houses so loud it sent a dog barking somewhere down the block. 14-year-old Malik Johnson, a skinny black teen with wide brown eyes and a gray hoodie darkened by sweat from basketball practice, froze in place. His hands trembled, still holding the ball he'd been dribbling moments ago. He blinked hard, confused, heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. What did I do?" he asked, voice shaking. The officer stepped closer, his hand resting on his gun holster. "We got reports of a robbery suspect wearing a hoodie. You fit the description." Malik's breath caught. "A hoodie?" he repeated softly, glancing down at himself like the fabric had suddenly turned into a crime. He looked around, scanning the street. It was empty. The sun had set minutes ago and the streetlights flickered weakly, casting long shadows. No one was there to help. No one except the two officers glaring at him like predators circling prey. The older cop's face hardened. "Drop the ball. Step forward." Malik obeyed, slowly placing the worn basketball on the ground. It rolled into the gutter, bumping softly against the curb. The younger officer grabbed Malik's wrist, twisting it roughly behind his back. "Hey, ow! You're hurting me," Malik cried. "Stop resisting." The cop barked, though Malik hadn't even moved. "I'm not. I swear I'm not." His voice cracked, fear spilling out in every word. From a window across the street, a curtain moved. An old woman peeked out, her face pale, her hand hovering at her lips. But when the older officer's flashlight beam swept across her house, she quietly pulled the curtain shut. Malik's breathing quickened. He tried to explain. "I live just 2 blocks away, sir. I was just quiet." The officer snapped. "You think we don't know a lie when we hear one?" "But I didn't do anything." Malik's eyes glistened. "Please, I just came from basketball practice. I can show you my bag, my coach's number." "Enough," the older cop interrupted. "Turn around." The cold brick wall pressed against Malik's chest as one of them patted his pockets, searching for weapons that didn't exist. His mind raced. He'd heard stories like this before, his mom's warnings, the news reports, the videos online. But never in his worst nightmares did he think it would happen to him. He wanted to scream, to run, but fear pinned him to the wall. His hands shook uncontrollably. "Please," he whispered, barely audible. "Can I just call my mom?" The younger officer chuckled, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Oh, you can tell her all about this at the station." Malik's heart sank. His mother, Agent Dana Johnson. He wished she were here. She'd know exactly what to say, how to make them listen. But right now she was miles away, probably still at work. Tears began to form in the corners of his eyes, but he blinked them away, not wanting to look weak. He tried again, his voice trembling. "Please, I didn't do anything wrong." The older cop sighed impatiently, stepping closer until Malik could smell the faint odor of coffee and tobacco on his breath. "Look, kid, the more you talk, the worse this gets. You want to make it easy? Stay quiet." "I just want to go home," Malik whispered, almost to himself. The words hung in the air, small, helpless, swallowed by the sound of the flashing sirens. For a moment, everything went still. The only movement was the gentle spin of Malik's basketball in the gutter, rolling slowly toward the drain as if trying to escape too. Then the radio crackled in the police cruiser. A dispatcher's voice said something about possible misidentification. But the officers ignored it. They were too busy asserting power they didn't deserve. Malik's knees wobbled. He tried to stay calm the way his mom had taught him. Slow breaths, steady voice, eyes down. But every nerve in his body screamed in fear, and somewhere deep inside a single thought kept repeating. If Mom finds out about this, they'll regret it. At that exact moment, Agent Dana Johnson sat alone in her office at the FBI Field Division, surrounded by half-empty coffee cups and stacks of case files. The clock on the wall ticked past 8 p.m. Most agents had already gone home. Only the hum of the fluorescent lights and the soft rustle of papers filled the air. She rubbed her temples, exhaustion creeping in after a 14-hour day. On her desk lay a kidnapping file she had been chasing for weeks, photos, timelines, and evidence maps. But her mind kept drifting to her son. Malik had promised he'd walk straight home after practice. Usually he'd text by now. Her phone buzzed against the table. Unknown number. She frowned. Who's calling this late? She muttered under her breath. She almost ignored it until instinct told her to pick up. Hello? The voice on the other end was shaky, terrified. Mom, they got me. Dana froze. Malik? Her son's voice broke. Mom, the cops, they… Before he could finish, another voice interrupted, gruff and impatient. Ma'am, this your kid? We're detaining him for questioning. The tone was casual, dismissive, like Malik wasn't a scared child but a criminal. Dana's pulse spiked. Her voice sharpened instantly. Detaining who? She demanded, rising from her chair so fast it rolled backward and hit the wall. The line was silent for a second. Then came the answer. Malik Johnson said he was walking home. Time seemed to stop. For a moment, Dana couldn't breathe. Her hand trembled as she gripped the edge of her desk. She'd faced armed criminals, corrupt politicians, and international fugitives, but nothing terrified her more than hearing fear in her son's voice. Her voice dropped low, controlled but lethal. Officer, where are you holding him? Corner of Maple and 9th, he said with a lazy tone. Routine check. You can come down if… But the call had already ended. Dana's training kicked in. She grabbed her badge, gun holster, and car keys in one swift motion. Papers scattered to the floor, forgotten. Across the room, Agent Rivera, her partner, looked up from his laptop. Everything okay, Johnson? Dana's jaw clenched tight. Her voice trembled with anger she rarely allowed herself to show. They just stopped my son. Rivera blinked, confused. Stopped him? For what? She didn't answer. Instead, she marched out of the office, her heels clicking like gunshots against the tile floor. Every step carried a rising storm of fury and fear. As she pushed through the glass doors of the FBI building, she tapped her earpiece. Dispatch, this is Agent Johnson. I need a location check. Maple and 9th active police detainment involving a minor named Malik Johnson. Verify unit IDs. The dispatcher's voice crackled. Copy that, Agent Johnson. Stand by. But Dana wasn't standing by. She was already in her black government-issued SUV, engine roaring to life. The tires screeched as she tore out of the parking lot, red and blue dashboard lights flashing. Her phone rang again. Rivera. Dana, wait. Do you want backup? I am the backup, she replied coldly, hanging up. As the city lights blurred past, her mind replayed Malik's trembling voice. She could picture him scared, alone, trying to stay calm. The thought made her grip the steering wheel tighter. She whispered to herself, breathe, Dana, think. But she couldn't think of anything except the rage building inside. She had trained officers on proper detainment protocol. She had led seminars on racial bias. She had stood in front of men who wore the same badge and told them, protect, don't persecute, and now, those same principles were being crushed under flashing lights on her son. Her SUV roared through intersections. She didn't even notice the traffic lights changing. In her mind, one phrase kept repeating, if they've hurt him, God help them. As she turned onto Maple Street, she saw the distant flicker of police lights cutting through the night sky. Her heart pounded like a drum. Within seconds, Agent Dana Johnson, one of the most respected agents in the state, was about to remind two officers what real authority looked like. Because tonight, justice wasn't just her job. It was personal. Malik sat on the cold curb, his wrists raw and red from the metal cuffs biting into his skin. His breathing came in shallow gasps, chest rising and falling fast. The smell of rubber, exhaust, and fear filled the air. A small crowd had gathered, neighbors, passers-by, people from nearby shops. Some held up their phones, recording. Others whispered in shock. But not one person dared step forward. Stop resisting, barked one of the officers, even though Malik hadn't moved an inch. His head hung low, tears streaking down his cheeks. He just wanted to go home, then screech. A black SUV came flying down the street, engine roaring. It swerved to a stop beside the police cruisers, tires smoking. The doors of the patrol cars swung open as the officers instinctively stepped back, hands near their weapons. The driver's door of the SUV opened slowly, and out stepped Dana Johnson. Her presence alone shifted the entire atmosphere. The streetlights glinted off her FBI badge clipped to her blazer. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with fury. Every step she took radiated authority. She stopped in front of the two officers, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement. Which one of you? she said, her voice low but razor-sharp. "Put their hands on my son." The older officer blinked, suddenly unsure of himself. "Ma'am, we were just what?" she snapped, cutting him off before he could finish. "Profiling another innocent black kid because he fit the description?" The words hit like gunfire. The crowd went completely silent. Even the hum of the police radios seemed to fade. The younger officer swallowed hard, glancing at his partner for help. We had probable cause." Dana took a step closer, her FBI badge catching the light. "You had bias," she said sharply, her voice echoing down the block. "And now, you're about to have a very real problem with the Department of Justice." Her tone was so controlled, so deadly calm, that both men froze. It was the kind of voice that made seasoned agents and hardened criminals alike stop breathing. She pointed toward Malik. "Take those cuffs off, now." Neither officer moved for a second. Then, trembling, the older one quickly reached down, fumbling with the key. The metal clicked open and the handcuffs fell to the ground with a dull clang. Malik didn't hesitate. The moment his wrists were free, he ran straight into his mother's arms, burying his face against her chest. Dana wrapped her arms around him tightly, one hand on the back of his head. "It's okay, baby. I've got you," she whispered, her voice trembling now, not from fear but from restrained rage. She turned back to the officers, still holding her son close. "You two better pray your body cams were on," she said coldly, "because if 1 second of this goes missing, I'll make sure you never wear that badge again." Neither officer spoke. They stood frozen, their authority stripped away, replaced by shame. The crowd murmured softly, some clapping, others shaking their heads. And as Dana guided Malik toward her SUV, the younger cop whispered under his breath, "She's FBI?" The older one exhaled shakily. "Yeah, and we just messed with the wrong family." Dana stood tall in the middle of the flashing lights, her son clinging to her side. The night air was heavy, silent, every sound amplified by tension. She turned to the two officers, her fury barely contained. Her voice was quiet, but every syllable cut like a blade. "What's your badge number?" The younger officer swallowed hard. "Ma'am, please, we were just doing our job." "Your job?" Dana repeated, taking a step closer. "Your job is to protect, not terrorize kids for walking home." Her words hung in the air like thunder. The crowd around them grew larger now. Neighbors, curious onlookers, people from nearby stores who had followed the sound of sirens. Some held their phones up high, recording every second. A woman whispered to her friend, "She's FBI." That single word, FBI, spread through the crowd like wildfire. Murmurs rippled. "FBI? She's his mom? Oh, they're done for." The officer's posture changed instantly. The arrogance that once filled their stance drained away, replaced by uncertainty and shame. They suddenly looked smaller, like schoolboys caught cheating on an exam. Dana's eyes shifted to Malik. His hand still trembled slightly as he wiped his tears. "Did they read you your rights, Malik?" she asked softly. He shook his head, eyes wide, voice barely a whisper. "No, ma'am." Dana turned back to the officers, her expression stone cold. "That's a violation of protocol," she said flatly. "And detaining a minor without cause?" She took a deliberate step forward. "That's another one." Neither man dared to speak. Dana pulled out her phone, her fingers steady as she dialed. "Yes," she said into the receiver, her voice sharp and professional. "This is Special Agent Dana Johnson, badge number 2197A. I'm reporting an incident of racial profiling and unlawful detainment involving 2 uniformed officers. Location, Maple and 9th Street. I want an internal affairs supervisor here immediately." The younger officer's face turned pale. His partner's jaw clenched as he muttered under his breath, "Oh, hell." The dispatcher on the line confirmed. "Copy that, Agent Johnson." "Yay, en route." Dana ended the call and slipped her phone back into her jacket pocket. "You both will file written reports by morning," she said calmly, almost like she was giving orders in a briefing. "And trust me, I'll be reading every word of them." The older cop tried to defend himself, his voice unsteady. "Ma'am, you don't understand. This neighborhood's been having issues. You thought wrong," Dana snapped. "You thought my son looked suspicious because of the color of his skin. You thought that a hoodie made him dangerous. You thought you could intimidate a child." The officer's voice faltered. "Don't," she said sharply, holding up her hand. "Just don't." Her tone was final. the kind of authority that left no room for argument. The crowd murmured louder now. People were angry, some even clapping in quiet support. An older man called out, "About time someone stood up to them." Another woman yelled, "That boy didn't deserve that." The officers stood in silence, faces flushed red with embarrassment. Malik watched his mother in awe. He had seen her as his mom, the one who made pancakes on Sundays, who reminded him to do homework, who hugged him goodnight. But this was someone else. This was Agent Dana Johnson, the woman who commanded rooms full of men twice her size. He had never seen her like this, calm, powerful, unstoppable. Dana looked at him and gave a reassuring nod, then turned back toward the officers. "If you're lucky," she said, "this will be a lesson, not a career-ending mistake. But I promise you, if this happens to another kid in this city or any other, I will make sure it's the last time you wear that badge." She stepped closer until she was inches from the older officer. Her voice dropped low. "Now get out of my sight." The two men exchanged nervous glances before retreating toward their cruiser. The crowd began to clap quietly, then louder, until the sound of applause filled the street. Dana stood there, arm around Malik, the flashing lights painting them in shades of red and blue. For the first time that night, Malik felt safe. Not because of the police, but because his mother had arrived and Justice had followed her. The flashing lights began to fade as a new set of vehicles rolled onto Maple and Ninth. The silver SUV with Internal Affairs Division printed on the side pulled up, its doors opening to reveal two suited investigators. Their expressions were serious, voices low as they approached the officers. The crowd quieted. Everyone could sense the shift, the energy had changed. The hunters had become the hunted. The two cops stood stiffly under the investigators' questions, their earlier confidence completely gone. Their words stumbled, their excuses fell apart, and every second felt heavier than the last. Meanwhile, just a few steps away, Dana sat in her SUV, her hand resting over Malik's. The adrenaline was slowly fading, replaced by the aching reality of what could have happened. Her voice softened as she looked at him. "You okay, baby?" Malik wiped at his eyes, his voice trembling. "I was scared, Mom, I thought. They might—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Dana squeezed his hand tighter, pulling him gently against her shoulder. "You did everything right," she whispered. "You stayed calm. You survived, that's what matters." He nodded, but his eyes were full of questions. "Why did they stop me? I wasn't doing anything wrong." Dana took a deep breath, staring out through the windshield at the flashing lights reflecting off the rain-slicked street. "Because," she said slowly, "some people still see skin before they see a person. They don't see your kindness, your heart, or your future. They only see what they've been taught to fear." Malik lowered his gaze. "That's not fair." "No," Dana said quietly, "it's not. But fairness isn't given, Malik, it's fought for. And tonight you reminded them that we don't back down." Outside, the two officers were being escorted toward their cruiser, no longer in control. Their faces were pale, their shoulders slumped. The crowd watched in silence. Justice, real justice, was finally in motion. The next morning, headlines across the city read, "FBI agent confronts officers who targeted her son." The story spread like wildfire, shared online, replayed on news channels, discussed in classrooms and police stations alike. Within 24 hours, both officers were suspended pending investigation. The department released a public statement calling the incident deeply regrettable and promising a full internal review. But for Dana, words weren't enough. She didn't want an apology. She wanted change. A few days later, she received a call from the police chief himself asking to meet. When they sat across from each other in his office, his voice was somber. "Agent Johnson," he began, "on behalf of this department, I want to personally apologize to you and to your son. What happened should never have occurred." Dana met his gaze steadily. "Apologies don't erase trauma," she said. "But they're a start," she leaned forward. "If you're serious about fixing this, then let me help you do it." And so she did. Within weeks, Dana Johnson was leading a mandatory training program for every officer in the district on racial bias, ethics, and accountability. On the first day, she stood before a packed room of uniformed men and women. Some looked embarrassed. Some looked defiant. But all were listening. She set down her notes and spoke from the heart. "Justice isn't about who wears the badge," she said. her voice steady and clear. It's about who has the courage to do what's right even when no one's watching. A heavy silence followed. One officer in the back lowered his head. Another nodded slightly. By the end of the session, something had shifted. Maybe not everything, but something. That night at home, Malik sat at the dinner table, quiet for a long time. Finally, he looked up. "Mom," he said softly, "do you think things will ever really change?" Dana smiled gently, brushing his hair back. "They already have, son." He frowned, confused. "How?" She looked him in the eyes, her voice full of calm strength. "Because this time," she said, "they met the wrong kid. And the right mother." Malik smiled faintly, resting his head on her shoulder. Outside their window, the world was still flawed. Still imperfect, but in that moment, hope felt real. You've just watched another story from Healing Corner, where every heart finds its voice and every pain finds its purpose. If this story touched you, don't just scroll away. Let it stay with you, change you, and remind you that kindness still matters. Subscribe, share, and join our family. Because at Healing Corner, we don't just tell stories. We heal through them.